responsible for the digital engagement side of Fiverr's community. So we have a forum. We have basically any kind of conversation that happens on social media networks. Anything that happens on third-party networks like Reddit, Quora, anything like that. Basically, if someone mentions Fiverr or says Fiverr on the internet, it gets funneled towards me and my group. And we get to figure out what to do with all those nice little comments. So yeah, a little bit about me. I've kind of been doing digital community in one way or another for about 10 years, maybe a little longer than that. I started my digital community life at Second Life, doing at Linden Lab.
Woo!
Yeah. I actually started at Second Life as a recruiter, have a hotel background, and ended up kind of getting into this community spirit and making sure that anybody who was using the product had a good time, and that's kind of the idea of community. You know, as a community manager, you want to make sure that whoever's using your product is having the best time possible, getting everything out of it. So that kind of led me into this digital community, and you know, what better community than the Second Life community. So I was there for about 3 years, went from there to a company called OnLive, did a little video game community. Went from there to Yammer, and was with Yammer for about 2 years into the Microsoft acquisition, and then kind of jump ship with everybody else. Very different cultures there. But at Yammer, I ran the customer success network. So we had a Yammer network for people who ran Yammer networks. So it was a network for community managers who were community managers of their own networks. And then I went from there to Lyft. Got the great opportunity to take over for Emily Castor at Lyft, doing kind of digital engagement for drivers there. Kind of found that drivers were doing a great job getting out there and driving, but when you gave them a Facebook lounge to interact with other drivers, it kind of enhanced the experience, made it feel like a little bit more like a workplace. You know, drivers who all drove at night, we found that they had a lot of similarities and say, hey, we can go do a meetup real quick, meet at the 7-Eleven out on Erie or whatever else. You have 3 or 4 drivers pop in. Just kind of a good little online, offline community experience. So I was there for, actually, I was only there for about 8 months, but we grew from 8 cities up to 68 cities. So that was during the explosive growth time of Lyft. So at Fiverr, I mentioned we were running all the digital communities. One of the big ones was Facebook. We have 1.4 million Facebook followers. There's a lot of engagement that happens on there. We have a lot of content. We have a whole content department that will work with influencers, that will work with our own freelancers to create blog content. We want to make sure that gets out there, and we have great conversations that happen on those on that content. So the problem we were running into at Fiverr was you have great content, you have a great article, you throw it up on your Facebook page, and what happens after that? I'm sure we've kind of all run into this, is that you get all of those fun little comments at the bottom that have absolutely nothing to do with the content that you're posting. Whether it's a support thing, whether it's, hey, here's my ad, go check out my gig. Hey, you know, how do I do this? What do I do this? Hello. Like, all of these things, absolutely not the conversation we want to have. We want to drive the good conversation around, you know, our CEO talking to entrepreneur about how freelancers and the booming economy don't really match up. It's a different conversation. So what do we do? Well, we were looking at replying to all of it. So there is a team, we have our support team in Miami, Florida. We try to reply to all of them. Hey, this is great, support will be in touch, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of wasted time. It's a lot of spent time in doing all that. As I mentioned, our Facebook page has 1.4 million followers. Last week alone, there's 212,000 engagements on posts that we've posted. So there's a lot going on there. We estimate there's probably about 10 hours a week for staff to go through, hide, monitor, get rid of, basically curate that Facebook page alone. That's a lot of wasted time. So trying to figure out how to solve this problem and move on past all of this just trash that's on the Facebook page and get to the good content that we wanted. We looked at what a majority of those posts were, and those posts ended up being 62% of them were support-related tasks. Cool. Can you go look at this ticket? Hey, this is that. Like, just questions and anything that fell into that little support group. So, you know, that's a majority of the posts. What do we do there? let's just go fix support. Let's go and talk to our support team and fix them. Well, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do when there are 14,000 new support tickets created every week. They're busy, they have lots to do, and that 10 hours that I mentioned earlier, taking them away from those 14,000 tickets, it's kind of a circle at that point. If we take people off those tickets to answer Facebook pages about those tickets that they're not answering, you kind of fall into this loop and spiral out of control. So it's, we're working with support to get them to be faster, to change their responses, to make sure that they are engaging in the way that aligns with the brand, the dimensions that we're mentioning on Twitter and Facebook, and just the overall brand perception. I don't know if anybody's done this before, but throwing up a Facebook post and saying, look, this is not what this channel is for.
Yeah.
This is what support is. This is where you need to go for support. Go to support. So we tried this. Obviously, it's one of those things. You're trying to change behavior of somebody. And Facebook is a public channel. Facebook's open. People are going to go to Facebook because they think somebody's there to answer them. Most of the time they are. Most of the time they're not. So this brings me to another side of it. We have a Fiverr forum, and it is an extremely busy forum, in my experience anyway. Here are some numbers just from the last couple weeks. Actually, this goes back, so we've got about 22,000 unique user visits every 30 days that come in. That translates into 1.7 million total page views for the forum itself. So the forum is just like, it's ridiculously busy. I have five moderators. They're great. They're Fiverr sellers who do this in their spare time, and they're amazing. We use Discourse for our forum as a hosting solution. Back in May last year, they introduced something called the DiscoBot into their forum. And this wasn't something we asked for. This wasn't something that we wanted. All of a sudden, this DiscoBot just started showing up and sending messages to people. Dug into it a little bit to figure out what it was. Turns out, what it does is it actually is welcoming every single one of the users when it creates a new account with us. And in order to interact with the forum, you actually need to have a Fiverr account. So it's a single sign-on from a Fiverr account to the forum. So you can read, but you can't participate unless you have a Fiverr account. So once you did the single sign-on, boom, you got a greeting from the DiscoBot, which is great because it's like, hey, here's our friendly staff with introductions to the friendly staff. Here are the badges, and here's the abilities. It basically outlined what the community guidelines were for the forum, how to get more badges. Like basically, badges was more of a reputation system that was built into the Discourse platform. And basically, like here are some bookmark this, and then it would continue on and post, hot threads, things were going on, things. You basically could have it say whatever you wanted to. So this got us thinking, why not create a Facebook bot to try to get rid of some of this support stuff? Well, in order to do that, what we needed to do was figure out, we did it, so, figure out, how to connect this Facebook bot to Zendesk, which was our support channel. So figuring out the Zendesk API, pulling it over, and creating a Fiverr chatbot. We actually, this aligned really perfectly because we were launching our chatbot category. So we went into our chatbot category, somebody who was interested in creating a chatbot, found him as a seller, brought him in, did a Facebook Live with him. He went through and created this whole setup for us. And it kind of broke down very simply, just going to URL endpoints. There was no fun things here. It was just going to URL endpoints. So start, you've got going to the categories. So if somebody goes down and says, hey, I'm looking for a specific category, I'm looking for a logo, I'm looking for SEO. And then there was also the support hookup, so somebody could go in and type their ticket number, get authorized, and get a status update on their ticket, which was kind of nice, because a lot of it was like, hey, look at this ticket. So being able to offer that as a solution for them to say, hey, yes, your ticket is still pending. If you have anything you want to add to the ticket, you can do that through this chatbot here. So it kind of took that off of the Facebook support page. This was the support, actually, yeah. So we API'd it to the Zendesk platform, which, again, totally seamless. It asks for an email, it asks for your ticket number, and then basically you can create a new ticket if you wanted to also. part of this also, I mean, this is kind of the categories. I don't know if you're noticing, but the buttons ended up kind of being a little problematic for us because, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Back up. Sorry about the flow. So we launched, I guess, the second or third week of September. Steady growth the entire time. These are unique users overall. So that's about 12,000 people jumped in, used the chatbot. Kind of, real peak when we pushed it and we did some promotions around it. But overall, you're looking at about 75 people average per day jumping in and interacting with the chatbot, which, whether it turns into less support tickets or less support inquiries on your Facebook page, whether it turns into new users, someone coming in and not knowing anything about Fiverr, learning about different categories and going in and becoming a new buyer, that's the funnel. That's the marketing funnel that we try to find the ROI on community all the time. This is a great example of how you can say, cool, I've sent X number of users in to buy new things from Fiverr. At this point, this is where I'd have a great slide on how the numbers actually changed and how we actually dropped the number of support queues on the Facebook page, but we did a platform shift from Lithium to Sprinklr back in December, so I don't have those numbers when it happened. But I can absolutely tell you that just from my own personal experience and going in there and seeing it, absolutely less. Like even today, I can go in there and kind of see there are less people asking about tickets. There are people not. They're still a little off topic, but I would say we solved the support problem. Also, when you do a chatbot in Facebook, you get a nice little very responsive tick on your Facebook page, so that makes it look a little nicer. So when we get to this, there was another. So this was great, and all those are great things, but Facebook Messenger is a messaging platform. It's not a button platform. And the buttons the slide should be a little bit further down, but those buttons, you'd have to scroll. So you get a card, click on it, goes to the next one, click on it, goes to the next one. So you weren't getting people deeper into those categories or whatever you needed to do. So, plus we were getting, because it's a messaging platform, we were getting people typing out what they wanted. That's, the button system's not going to do that it's not going to understand that. So what we wanted to do was try to introduce language processing into our chatbot. We got a call from IBM asking us if we wanted to use them for our social monitoring and social listening. As I mentioned before, we had actually just switched over to Sprinklr, so we are in a contract with Sprinklr now, and we are not going to do a switch. But what this did do was kind of got the wheels going on what about IBM Watson for natural language processing on our chatbot. So we are currently in production of chatbot version 2, and this allows you to create intents for your users. So you can kind of set up all of the intents that you are looking for, the entities, and then set up dialogue and actually have full natural language processing so someone can have a full conversation without having to go through the buttons. And then the endpoints can actually be the cards, which we mentioned earlier, as opposed to the buttons, the beginning points to go through. This is kind of just an example. Hey, I'm ready to get started, so what do? Someone types support, the support _ ticket, that is the intent. So you train Watson to understand the intent of specific keywords, of phrases and things like that. So someone goes, I need support, or look up ticket XXXXX. Cool, it's going to understand that that's the intent, and it's going to get you down that funnel towards logging in, getting that ticket going, getting the API there. That's actually, so yeah. At this point, I mentioned this before also, I was going to say, cool, we're going to launch the chatbot right now, and we were all going to be a part of this like fun little thing. But on Monday, Facebook decided to stop. They've been in the news recently, so they decided to stop new apps and chatbots from joining until they can do a full audit. So we're kind of in a holding process right now, and I'm trying to maybe launch it next week. But, so for now, that's why you get a nice little demo right here of this little screenshot of me going through my presentation. So I was just going to do a quick recap of why we were using chatbots. So a lot of times when someone says let's introduce a robot or let's introduce something that's not a human in community management, there's a lot of pushback because for me it's always been that one-on-one connection or that one-to-many connection where you kind of say, you sit down with a group and talk about your product, your solutions to everything else. So my takeaways from introducing a chatbot, doing the member introductions for the forum, I didn't even think about doing that. When the discourse introduced it, it was like, why not? Why not do this? And a lot of times the users are there for the quick information anyway. You don't want that really quick thing. I'm going to launch an A/B test for a subset of users who are not engaged with the chatbot and members of users who are engaged to see if there's any major differences between some of the engagement that we see, if they're more likely to jump in and do some answer questions or ask questions for that matter. Product guidance. We have right now in our on our website, if you go to the logo category, it asks you very simple questions. Hey, are you looking for a simple? Are you looking for a stylized? Or it goes through some of the questions on, and some of the questions for logo design. We then offer up freelancers who specialize in those categories that you're looking for. I want to incorporate those ideas into this new chatbot where you could just start asking those questions real time. Say, oh, you're looking for a logo, cool. Are you looking for a cartoon? Are you looking for a modern? Are you looking for this? And just kind of get them down the flow. And in the future, Fiverr has what's called Available Now. So if you are on the site and you are looking at a freelancer, it could pop up, they're available now. At that point, you can actually have that chat with them right away. So, one of the biggest things with freelancers is you want to have that conversation. You want to see if they're up to the task of doing what you're looking for, if you guys are on the same page design-wise. Being able to do that, offer that through the chatbot also. So you get down that funnel, and all of a sudden it's like, cool, I've got 4 freelancers who are online right now. We want to talk to one of them. So you don't leave that system of Facebook, or you don't leave that system of the website for that matter, if we push this onto the website. You mentioned before support ticket lookups. So the API connector to Zendesk for us, any other support platform, you can actually do real-time support updates. And then FAQs, like just pulling all of your support information into the FAQ so that's into the chatbot. So if someone asks a question that is support related, the chatbot knows that and actually can pull up that, oh, are you asking a question? Here's some answers that we have for you. Just again, keeping them in a single platform so that they're not running through your website, clicking on 5 or 6 different articles to figure out if this is the right one. Is this one, did this help you at the bottom? Like, there's a lot of those that don't really work. So that was basically the end of my quick presentation. I was gonna put it back on everybody else. Like, what technologies is everybody using out here to augment your digital engagement strategies? And then, have you thought about chatbot to help with engagement, or are you currently using chatbot with any of your own strategies and engagement platforms?
So I have a handful of questions. I'm all stupid, just one for now.
Sure.
Are you, when you're asking for the support ID that you use to go pull API, are you authenticating it all to verify that user? Because I could just give you whatever ID and find out what you submitted.
Yeah. So what we do is we ask for a ticket number and email address, and they both have to match. So if you can put in any email address, like cool, what email address? Or sorry, what ticket number is associated with that? Do you want to look up?
Okay.
So that therefore there's a little bit of authentication. We don't give specific details about the ticket.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So there's no personal information that's shared. It's not like, cool, here's the entire ticket that you submit.
Yeah.
No, we don't do that. That's absolutely a breach of security for and privacy for all of our users. So it's a very simple, this ticket is still operational, this ticket is still open.
Okay.
And then if you wanted to add to it, you can.
Cool.
But you can't. You won't see everything.
Cool.
I was a few minutes late. I don't know if you mentioned this, but it's not on the end, so I'll ask. Do you have metrics for successful engagement? So you're talking about engagement a number of times.
Yes.
But isn't the important thing, did I solve your problem?
So I can say without metrics, it did solve the problem. The metrics got lost in our platform shift when we went from Lithium to Sprinkler back in December. So there was a point when I was going to have a big reveal about this. It dropped 40%, it dropped 80%, or whatever else. I lost those metrics when we did the platform shift back in November, so I don't have that. But I can just tell from being on there and talking to the agents, they have more time to go talk to influencers on Twitter, to go and answer actual questions on Facebook, and to actually do the engagement that we want from the content that we want on our Facebook page. So yes and no.
Logo
17 different platforms out there.
Yeah,
to
so I'm
do,
just
yeah.
wondering, I mean, I have a chart that I can tweet out too, like the pros and cons of all the different ones, but why Motion.ai? Why you might have said that.
No, I didn't
but-
say that, but it's a good question. So we were put in contact with Motion AI. I believe our CEO is an investor in Motion
That's
AI.
what we're doing.
Yeah. So at that point, when we were talking about this, they're like, try Motion AI. And so I actually talked to the CEO of Motion AI, and he put me in contact with one of his guys. So we just ran with it from there.
And is that more of a drag and drop user interface?
Yeah,
that you guys
let me
can
go back to
see
what I
quickly?
showed you before. There. So it's very simple. Like each one of these is, you can actually do URL endpoints basically from a display category. What I just build it out very simply, and then each one can have like more JSON coding into it, so you can actually do a lot more with it also. So you can build out a full flow. This was just a very simple. We wanted to do this really quickly, so this took us probably 2 days total. And to tell you the truth, the hardest part for our side was to figure out where you wanted everybody to go, what you wanted the chatbot to say. That's actually probably the hardest one to do, is because you want to make sure it aligns with your the branding. Do you want the chatbot to be sentient? Do you want it to say I, or do you want to say we, as in we as a company are offering you this, or you can introduce the chatbot, I am an entity, and at that point it's I the rest of the time. So there's those things you think about that I didn't really expect when we were kind of writing it out, because I think for me it was just like, cool, let's just put them here. And so, oh, they need to say something, it needs to be. It's actually a little harder now, because with Watson, we're figuring out a full conversation flow, so it's got to have a conversation like you would have with anybody else in the room. Like, that's great, like, saying, that's great, this is going to be amazing. Your actually,
And for the people that came late, you might want to re-explain Watson.
sure, Watson's version 2 of our chatbot. So this was version 1. We used Motion AI for version 1. And then Watson we're going to use for natural language processing, because with version 1, people were typing, because Messenger is a messaging platform and not a button pushing platform. So we wanted natural language processing, so people could actually go through the flow and actually have a conversation with a chatbot.
And was Watson's interface similar to this?
So Watson's
Yeah, sorry.
interface is, that's Motion AI. That's fixed one. There it is. So with Watson, you create intents, as I mentioned before. So each intent, and actually the graphic design one's probably the biggest. So you say graphic design, and that's the intent of what the user is looking for. And this is just for categories. So if someone writes 2D model or 3D model or flyers or illustration, basically you can kind of assume that they're looking for illustration, or they want to be a part, like want to find that. So, and you can do that with all your categories. Logo, and I just did the top level categories. And then you have simple ones like hello, goodbye, forum, and those are the intents of where you want those users to go. And then you create dialogue trees based on that. And this is still kind of in the process of building out, but where's the logo one? Logo ones. So if the bot recognizes logo, and I'll just do a quick demo here. Hi, thanks for visiting the Fiberbot. How can I help you? I want a logo. It recognizes logo and says, cool, you have one chance to make a first impression, so let's go out and get you that logo. Here's the link to our logo category in Fiverr. So yeah, that's kind of, we're still in the process. Like, this is very, very, very simply what Watson can do. When I was talking to the IBM people a couple weeks ago, they mentioned, there's full language processing on all languages. So somebody could come in, start typing Spanish, it would understand and actually just start doing full localization for us. So we didn't necessarily have to do it. As I mentioned before, the available now, being able to connect them with freelancers now, that's something we can absolutely do a little later. I think that's actually one of the most exciting ones for me. And then actually pulling down the tree of, I'm looking for a logo, how do I do this? And like building out that idea and then really getting them specifically what they're looking for.
So how much intelligence is there behind it? Like if I say, I commissioned somebody to do a logo and they still haven't delivered or something like that.
So that goes to the platform itself. So with Fiverr, when you find a freelancer on Fiverr to do your logo, found somebody, you like their design style, you've had a conversation with them, cool. You agreed on a price, you kind of do everything. At that point, the relationship is really between you and the freelancer. So back and forth, there's messages. Certain freelancers will offer revisions. They'll offer other things that will allow you to really hone in what you're looking for. Some of them are one-offs, like and some of them are just require one-offs. So depending on really what you're looking for, but as a marketplace, Fiverr is really the marketplace, I guess, for those connections between you and a freelancer to help you get your digital work done.
Okay, fine, but I'm just saying somebody didn't realize that, right? So they go to your Facebook page,
Sure.
right, and this agent
So that-
pops up,
and that goes
they type their issue in there, which is what you're saying.
Gotcha, and that would either go, so in my head, just figuring out a flow, that would either go towards FAQ if that was set up, or saying, hey, that's something that unfortunately we'll have to open a ticket for, let's do that. And you open a new support ticket, at that point it becomes a support issue because something here we don't want to trade personal information. Like, I don't want your credit card information, I don't want all of that here. That goes to support. That's a secure system, those are secure emails that go back and forth. At that point, let's support handle all those. And then that goes into like a dispute, if there is a dispute, or that goes
Right.
into something else. So that's the next level.
So what I'm trying to get at is
Sure.
when you say it goes to, is what is that process
So
like? Does your tool
I
figure
would-
out that this is a support issue, or does it say blah 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 logo blah blah blah? Oh, you only have one chance to make a first
You train
impression.
it, yeah, absolutely. You can train it, and that's why so you can clear every time you update. You'll sit there for about 2 minutes and say Watson is learning. So every time I type something new, it's like Watson's learning, and then you start typing out. So if I type logo again, and it's not getting the right intent, you can actually change this intent. So you train it. You train this chatbot. You train Watson to do pretty much whatever you need it to do, and make sure that it's set before you go live with it. So again, I had a problem with a logo. Word logo. It's gonna hit that problem first. So it's gonna understand that you're coming in with an issue versus you're looking for a logo. So that's where that kind of training Watson is a little bit longer than I was expecting it to. Again, because we got the Motion.ai chatbot up like in a couple of days. This one's taken almost a couple months now.
I have a couple questions that
Sure.
are related. The first is, does the chatbot know how to, you may have already covered this,
Sure.
chatbot know how to reroute to existing conversations? Like, oh, others are already talking about this. Great idea, can it do that, or we have to train it to do
Each
that?
conversation is an individual conversation. To tell you the truth, because this hasn't been live yet, I don't know if it's going to learn from conversations. The only learning that I know of it is that when I tell it to do something new. So if we're starting to see, and you can go back and actually get a full history of all the conversations, so you can see where people are dropping off. If people aren't continuing on to where you need them to go, that's what was happening with Motion AI. We were seeing that people were trying to type, and then we're just losing them at that point. So that's why we decided to go with version 2 and kind of upgrade it. But each conversation is a silo, so each one does not.
Oh, sorry, so it's direct
Exactly.
conversation, not.
Exactly. It's not a
Okay.
formy type feel. It's just a one to robot.
And then the other question was about like your team success metrics. So you mentioned like the team
Yeah.
got more time back in
I
their
wish I had those right now.
Which is amazing. So I imagine you're working on it, are going to shift like how their goal, how their performance, or like what are the new metrics?
What's interesting about Fiverr, and I guess it's good and bad, the team isn't actually my team. So it's a support team. So I have maybe half of their time each day, and I have maybe 10 agents who are also trained in social support. So they handle any messages that come in, any things that pop up in Sprinkler that need assistance or whatever. So their metrics are actually tied to their Zendesk ticket queues, and they understand that they're also doing support stuff. So for an SLA or from a metric standpoint, I haven't set any yet. Just because when I joined about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, it was really, really bad. I mean, it was just every piece of content that we had was maybe 10 or 15 comments of just garbage on there. So getting to where we are now, where we only have maybe one piece of garbage is a big thing for me. And then actually there's people talking about the actual content, or saying Fiverr's great, or saying, hey, this is really cool, or like starting to tag other friends and saying, hey, this is something you need to look at.
So, as you said, this is, no matter how complex and sophisticated it is, it's still
feel like I don't think a replacement is necessarily there. Just as like I wouldn't want a robot to come in and start moderating our forum 100% of the time. I think that
What would you like it to do?
I would like just kind of what it's doing now, where it's kind of guiding users into where they need to be or making the right decisions. The support thing I think is great, just a very top level support support issues. And then as I mentioned before with the forum, the introductions and kind of the quick guidance of where you need to go right away. Again, I don't think that this is a replacement for human interaction at all. I feel like there is still a need for community managers, there's still a need for support agents. This just scrapes the top off and lets them get to the meat and the actual problems and the things that really require investigation or some hand-holding or something really bad happened. Let's get a human, some empathy in there because this does not replicate sympathy or empathy at all. A human ideally should with support or with moderation of the forum.
So is there a way to have it like link up with your forums? Or like if there was a problem, they could like go do a search in the forums
So right now we're
suggest
just doing like URLs. Like cool, here's a topic about that. To tell you the
those
truth,
are static, right?
this is very sad, yeah. So they go to threads that are there. I would love, I actually truthfully haven't looked into Discourse to see what kind of, it's open source, so I'm assuming we could probably do something very similar to understanding, cool, like this person's talking about this or having an issue with that, or, a lot of the things that, some of the initial feedback I got about this were, some people are asking, how do I make money on Fiverr? That's like one of the big questions that we see all the time. Like, how do I make money on Fiverr? We can then post them to forums about users saying, cool, this is how I started, this is how I got my first gig, this is how I did this is how I grew my brand, this is how I didn't spam on social media, this, we can kind of get to that point of sharing that information. I would love to do something like that, so that's maybe version 3.
That sounds risky though, because I mean, you can do that, you have to have some confidence.
And that's the thing too. So
Right.
with a forum, like, I have 100% confidence in my moderators
Right.
going on Quora, going on Reddit, and answering questions there because they know the threads that are helpful, they know the situations that they're finding people in, and they will go. I'm not there yet for this, but if version 2 works out well, cool, then maybe. Plus the forum is also a very dynamic thing, so one answer could be outdated or old or whatever else.
So you're mostly using this as a contact collection play for the most part.
Yeah.
And I know, and I've lost track of Discourse, so this may be a question that you can or cannot answer. But at one point they were talking about using DiscoBot to sort of introduce you to random people. Is that within
That's not happening with ours.
Okay.
Our Discobot.
Okay.
Maybe set it somewhere else.
Maybe they dropped it, but I was just wondering, like, how is there any idea for engaging new users in your forums with existing users or any of that?
I haven't gotten to that point yet, but to tell you the truth, like, I feel like the audience that's coming into a Facebook chat is not the same audience that's coming into a forum. So being that connection may not be the best, but that's just me thinking about that right here on the spot. So.
Have you used any of the Facebook chatbot growth stuff? It's kind of cool. Like you can comment on Facebook Live and it'll automatically add you to a list, or you can embed it on your website for increasing your list. It's more marketing stuff.
Yeah,
But what's really
absolutely.
cool is like you can click on one button and it knows everything
And it's got all
about
the
you.
information
So
about
like
it.
it increases conversion rate really quickly.
What is also kind of nice and kind of not nice about Fiverr is that we have a full acquisition team that sits in Tel Aviv that has nothing to do with engagement and content. So our content creators here in San Francisco, we kind of work in tandem because she'll post something, find influencers and whatnot, and I'll end up taking it after that. So from a marketing standpoint and an acquisition funnel standpoint, they're the ones that will go in and do ads. They'll do the Facebook Live extra stuff that goes on top of it. Truthfully, when there's a Facebook Live, I'm there making sure the comments are clean and making sure people are saying bad things like this one that we had earlier.
I love it, you take a minute of it just for fun.
I want to use your service, but so many people complain about bad customer service. So that's some of the things that totally not useful to the conversation that's going on Facebook Live right now, but it is good to know for feedback for our support team.
Are you engaging customers when they comment on posts on your page, or only when they personally message you?
No, we'll do page comments too. If it's anything like private, we'll say, hey, can you DM us or contact support. But if there's a general question about something, we will absolutely engage on it.
I mean, just the bots that
No.
with a comment.
So the bots will only handle Messenger. So it'll only handle a message coming in. It will not work on comments. That's where Sprinkler comes in. Sprinkler will actually, they monitor, like Lithium, Sprinkler, name a social monitoring tool. They will be the ones that will monitor that and put it in a ticket in front of a support agent. And that's why I think there's still a need for support agents, because I do like that personal touch for certain things.
Yeah.
Have you thought about, you mentioned earlier there's like a billion messenger apps or whatever out there. Have you looked at rolling it out to other networks? For me personally, in my community, like Facebook's not really,
Sure.
but I'm also interested in like, there's a plethora of other stuff out there.
Tons.
Even if it was just like Twitter DMs, and blow up my DMs and
So,
chat.
yeah, I'm totally with you. Facebook was our primary
Yeah,
source
yeah,
of that's why we ended up with Messenger, but it can be adapted to being a static little corner window on our website. It can be
Okay.
pretty much used for anything you're looking for. Like there's a way to adapt it to Twitter DMs, because as long as the APIs are open for those platforms.
Yeah, you've
then
seen,
you're-
I guess what I was maybe asking is like you've seen these services that you use also extend to other stuff
Yeah,
that's out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's stuff out there.
If there's a will, there's a way.
Totally.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Cool.
Before we break to network, I just want to thank Matt Fiber.
Yep.
Yay.
Thanks, Susan.
And thanks you guys for coming at the earlier hour. These meetups are now going to start at 6, not 7. Seems like people are happy about that because there's full house. And we're now going to be taking them as a road show like this. So if you have a cool office, this was feedback we got from our members. You got sick of our office, totally fair. We'd love to have you host us at your office. So if you're interested, let me know. And finally, next month we'll be at Salesforce in the Ohana Room at the top of the new tower at the highest building in San Francisco. So I'm pretty excited about that. With several community managers, including Maria Agneva, and some other people using. Yeah, she's gonna speak.
She hired me at Yammer, and I worked with her at Yammer.
Everyone who's worked with her loves her. And so she and a few others, I think there's like 3 other community managers who have used Salesforce, nonprofit, for-profit. So that'll be a very cool panel. That's next month. I'll be sending the meetup announcement around. You won't miss it. And with that, just thank you to Fiverr again.